the landscape of tech tools that are available. It's grown quite a lot, so you have a lot of tools at hand to choose.
Crazy. I'm trying to consume a lot of stuff and try to evaluate how these things could simplify my work, my life, my everything.
Your practice changes, right? Like you don't want to code the website because that's been a stage in your career that's maybe past, or now you focus on other parts.
It just enriches our lives, in certain ways. People who were not able to do sketches, now your customers, they can now, and this helps them to communicate to you better what they want. Because even emojis, we use emojis which are already like old school, for them.
That's cool.
All right, you have any topic to talk today?
Yes, I think I still have two on the list that I would like to discuss with you, especially from the tech side. So the one topic we had last time, we talked about the small wins, I think it was. If you have like stations in the project, to also see them and celebrate them, which I think is nice. Then we kind of switched to live situations like this, which I think was also really good discussion.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
One topic I was really curious to hear about from your side is the landscape of tech tools that are available. That's something I would be interested to check, because I think just from the way that I perceive it compared to a few years ago, it's grown quite a lot. So you have a lot of tools at hand to choose.
Crazy.
And the other one is, I think, also to look at when things don't go as planned. So if you might have some small wins, but then you hear some feedback or critical feedback, or you don't get to stick to the timelines. I find very interesting topic, because I think that over the last few years, I've really looked at it from different angles, like not taking it personally, but looking at it from the project side, things like this. So I think those are two topics I would be curious to chat about. But how do you feel? Which one is more interesting for you?
Well, let's start with the tooling. I think the tooling changes and emerges so quickly now in AI era, or how to call these times.
Yes.
So many things simplify our lives, or at least pretend to.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to consume a lot of stuff and try to evaluate how these things could simplify my work, my life, my everything. And in my daily job, like at work, there is no day that I don't use some artificial intelligence help with a code, with an advice, with a question or so. Something that I Googled before, something that I try to think more upfront before. Now I have my personal mentor, let's say like that, who advises me when I formulate my thoughts correctly. And that's part of the work already. And I think, at least in my case, it will be more and more part of my work. It will be more like a feeling that I'm building things like with somebody at that moment of time, absolutely, like together, and I can consult anytime, any second. I can consult somebody who is always online and ready to help. It doesn't mean that the advice from this person is like 100% correct, and so I assume that I'm more or less like think like it's a real person who doesn't have context that I have, for example, or maybe not so knowledgeable in certain areas like I am, but this advice with my review, with my kind of process of this advice helps a lot to speed up development, verify quality of development, resolve issues, find answers much faster. And so that's just the programming work. But beyond programming, there are plenty of other tasks that I'm doing related to my creative business and training business and so forth. And there I also do many stuff with the tools. One of the things that I'm now working on is improving my flywheel or funnel in favor to enable people who are my fans to quicker access my services. I have now 2 services. One is mentoring, one-on-ones, and the second is this big workshop that I created already last year. And
Nice.
yeah, and I want to give it access, and I rework my website slightly to adjust to this, so this information for offers is available very fast. And it's pity to admit that I'm building my website using Framer, not using writing code myself, but I'm using Framer. And
Interesting side effect.
yeah, that's, if you don't know, that's a constructor
Yeah.
website where you could build stuff fast. And
It's a great tool.
and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful tool, and that's exactly because it's just faster to do things, way faster to put my landing page in place, to connect, to create links between pages, to do any design that I need, to fix everything without writing any line of code. Okay. And it looks like I need is there are no, in comparison to many other website constructors, let's say, there are no restrictions on a certain layout template or so. I fully design and build it like I want.
Nice.
And it goes faster everything. I don't need to care about many things that I shall care if I would code that myself. It's a shame from one perspective. From another, from another perspective, that's I think a part of life, and you choose like what is priority at a certain moment for you is. And for me now, the priority is not just to practice programming, because I'm practicing this at work at a different level. So I don't want to build another website, but rather to speed up the development of the offer that I have. And this framer is excellent tool to fulfill this. I also thought, like, from perspective of financials, like, okay, like if I build this myself, it just takes like hours, to put everything in place, to write this code, think about this and so forth, think about the design, think about how pages will look like, how I will navigate, sitemap, how to build it and so forth. And it takes hours. And if I compare and buy a Framer license for monthly subscription and so, at the end it's cheaper, way cheaper, that I pay them $10 a month rather than I spend hours building myself, because the speed is different. They have everything in place for me to just put like building blocks here and there, resize, recolor, whatever I want, change fonts, full customization out of the box, And that's also a part of this tooling, tooling offers you a lot of stuff. Or another thing that I did recently, I had my wife's previous version of the website stored on AWS, and they were charging me for pictures, because on your website there are plenty of pictures, and then I wanted to store that with the whole version. So a static website with a lot of pictures, and the AWS was charging me for hosting these pictures. And I recently figure out that there is a Cloudinary service that allows you to upload pictures and resize if necessary automatically, just by providing a certain parameter in the URL of the picture, exactly what I needed for a website. And I moved there and on their hobby package, and they allowed me to put like multiple gigabytes of pictures in for free. And
nice.
Now the website is stored not on the AWS anymore, and no charges are applied there, nothing. And I spent like 2 or 3 hours moving this stuff around. And now I'm out of this subscription from AWS.
Great examples.
This is an example. Another example is, now I'm also thinking like, okay, how can I make a consistent public brand of myself, And normally this is about some graphics, some same color used everywhere, you know that better than me as a designer, and maybe some illustrations that accompany some contents that I share, which are done in the same style, all these
Mm-hmm.
forms kind of this public brand, of certain company or person. And
Yeah.
I'm evaluating now certain tools, how to create unique illustrations in the same style based on my prompts using AI.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe at some point I come up to these two, so I could accompany my contents with some illustrations that will be totally unique, and the output will be in the same style like I need.
Mm-hmm.
This was not
Yeah.
possible before without hiring somebody to do this
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
continuously.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like many tools, like for copywriting, I'm using Grammarly. I'm not sure whether I will continue because I'm paying them a pro license every year. But now Apple announced their solutions that they will release in next macOS for free. That will be also grammar checker and so forth.
Right.
I'm also on the paid version of ChatGPT that helps me with coding and so forth. My wife is also actively using this for her research tasks. So yeah, AI, at least tools, but not only AI, like firmware as well, becomes very active part of our life, and it just helps out at the end. Yeah, it's not out of the box that I'm like immediately getting the huge value when I start using the tools. I need to figure out how to prompt them. I need to figure out how to communicate with this machine, with this computer, with these
Yes.
AI models. And it's a skill that is not given,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, at least I see in my experience some peers are also trying with some coding assistants, and the coding
Mm-hmm.
assistant doesn't give you the output immediately that you could consume, and then people
Mm-hmm.
give up because they want something like click boom amazing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately with AI it's not yet like that. Okay, maybe on some super basic stuff that, for example,
Yeah.
you were not able to write any social post for your social media, and now you just type write me a post about this and AI writes to you. Maybe this is like on a basic level click boom amazing, but if you want like more advanced, more customized, more yours, then of course it requires you these skills of prompting, skills of
Exactly.
training people, training the model how you want it to behave.
Yeah.
And I'm doing this, I'm incorporating these, trying things and so forth, and evaluating tools based on their efficiency and based on their economy from that perspective. And I only personally see that it changes my personal life, my career, my work. It changes a lot, and I believe that for many it could be a big benefit, and people just start to explore, discover these tools, and give them longer tries than just a click, because the click won't give you what you want.
I think that's a very important point. I think you brought a lot of very positive examples, which is nice. I mean, it's nice to see that. I think also your practice changes, right? Like you don't want to, like you mentioned, don't want to code the website because that's been a stage in your career that's maybe passed, or now you focus on other parts. So it's totally okay, I think. And I think what you mentioned, the conversation you have with the tools, like you said, it's a partner you work with. And I think that's very interesting because what I see on the creative side, from the design side, that conversation has really a focus. Because I think for us in the team, when I see everybody trying or we use it for the projects, it's really nice because you have to be very clear in what you actually want. It's very similar to the old design process where you started working on something, you had some sketches, you had some ideas, but then with the client together, you have to refine. Like you said, it's not click, boom, done. And you're like, this is great. Because if you want to write a blog post or finish the design of the website, maybe this is how ChatGPT thinks things could look like. But then you have to tell it, of course, what you mean by efficient or by nice. So you have to define those things and be clear about your goals. And that I found very interesting because it also meant for the clients that they have to take a closer look at what they're actually asking for, which is really good. So it helps them to prepare things. So they now come to us more with wireframes or with ideas, things they can generate by themselves. which has not happened in the last year. So they come with Figma files. They can use these AI tools in Figma where they generate the pages for them. This is great. And then I think it comes to the point where they don't have the vocabulary to move on, to get closer to what they want. So they don't have the words to explain to the tools what they actually need. And I feel like that's more where they come to us, rather before there's like, okay, I need a website, can you make a logo for us? Yeah. So I think it's become much more complex, which is nice because people can really dive into the work themselves before they come to us or with us. But then you really move on to a lot of more features in the product. Like you said, so I think like you're doing your website, you think more about the business, the things you offer, not only about how to build the website, but actually what you offer with it. So it's been quite a change, I think, the last 2-3 years to see how this evolved. Like you said, from the tooling, from the pricing, from the tools that are available, how you use them.
I agree, absolutely. It just enriches our lives, in certain ways. People who were not able to do sketches, now your customers, they can now, and this helps them to communicate to you better what they want.
Yes.
And this is a win-to-win for everybody, right? Because you understand better what they want, so you will deliver the results which are closer to what they expect.
Yes. So I think now the quality of the briefings, for example, got so much better. Before it was maybe one page or just some thoughts in an email where you had to do the workshops. And now I task them also sometimes to write better briefings. So they use the tools to better understand what does it mean to write a briefing? What do I need to do? So I think it's very interesting. On the other side, I think one thing that I want to discuss is the literacy or, like the competence you need to use the tools you mentioned. Like you need to know how to prompt and how not to prompt. That's something I would be curious to hear from your side, because I think, like when we met each other, we were talking about LLMs, like large language models or training them. That's something that has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think when you use them, so I've been extensively using it the last few months, really like very intense, to ask questions, to tell me how to do things or do tasks. And I think if you do things that are more literate, so you talk about like opinions, you talk about knowledge, that's something where it's pretty good. But I think if it comes to specific tasks, like asking for this or how to build this, in coding, I think it's pretty good because that's where it originated. So people who did coding built the tool, like ChatGPT or others. Yeah. But then I go into construction, for example, or design processes, and it doesn't fully understand the word like a user story or was it a user flow, things like this, which are kind of basic. So I feel like at some points it's very good. In other points, it's really not. And then when the students we teach, for example, they're like, okay, I looked into user stories. This is what ChatGPT gave me, but it's totally off from the task. Yeah. And of course, they do not know, right? Like it's wrong or not right. So I was curious to see how you deal with this at work or with your projects. If you don't recognize, or if you recognize something like this happens, how do you work with it?
Well, the only option like that I find at the moment is to like monitor and review it. Don't trust it. It's your mentor, it's your side buddy that will advise you, tells you, but oftentimes it could tell you complete nonsense. Sometimes you could say, okay, maybe I prompted wrong. Maybe I didn't provide it enough context, and then if you try, maybe it then understands better and gives you better output. But other times there are some topics that these LLMs are not trained enough with yet, and therefore they have less knowledge about this. And a good example from my perspective is the following. I'm training people on certain subjects, and most of the subjects I take from the back-end development and try to apply them to the front-end development. And this is very new, for front-end discipline, when we see that a certain back-end concept is applied to the front-end. And ChatGPT or these LLMs doesn't know that. And therefore, when I try to prompt them and tell them how I do it, they still give me an answers based on their knowledge, which is different, which is related to the front end, how people do on front end,
Right.
I tell them, okay, we could test software this and this way, and we test this because of this or this, and they tell me like something that is completely opposite, because on the internet it's full of opposite opinion. They think we have to test this, we have to do this and this, but I'm like, no, this is like not the best approach. Yes, it's valid, it's popular, but there is a better approach, this one. And of course that these models are not trained with my brain, with my perspective on this, and therefore they operate based on their knowledge and trainings. What is very helpful for me is Notion, this notebook, because in Notion I put all my social posts inside Notion before they are published. I have contents about my learning materials all there. And in Notion, they recently invented Ask Notion feature, and they put in context your whole notebook, but just yours. And you ask questions about what you want to ask, but the context is your knowledge that you put in. And since I'm putting it throughout the years, every social post, every lesson that I publish somewhere or write or use in my trainings is there, then the output is very quality, very good. And it's like I would answer that, or closely to how I would answer that. Okay. And that's different because they somehow managed to scope the model to this context, that I have added throughout the years. So they don't use any popular stuff that they learned from the internet, from whatever resources they had, but rather my material. And so since I have plenty of material, this output is very different, very quality, very like I need it, more or less.
I think that really brings up a good question. Also one that I was thinking about in this context, because I think now the more I use the tools or I see people use them, the question is what is actually right? Which approach is right? Or is there actually one thing or one way to do it right? Because I think previously also that discussion has been there. Different cultures have different approaches to certain things, how they do it. We understand words in different contexts. They are different meanings. And I think the more I used it, so I typed some things, I had this conversation about a certain book that I was reading. And then I realized, okay, maybe I asked the question in the wrong way, or I didn't say it very specific. And I think the second part is very curious because it's now a global culture. So it takes all the data it has into account from different cultures, different approaches. And that I find very impressive because, as you can see with different countries, they see different things, right? Somebody says it's right, somebody says it's wrong. Yeah. So how do you then realize something that's scientifically proven right? Because I think when you do science research to prove something, or you have some certain background to prove certain things, that's how it's usually done in a scientific approach or that area. And then we say, okay, we have done the testing. With certainty, we can say this is how it could be. So I'm curious, two sides, because I see that research is also picking up. Like there's Google's, what's the name again? I don't know the one.
It was BART before, but now they renamed it to Gemini.
Yes, there's another one that looks for medicine or like different kinds of, I don't know the name at the moment, but it does some research. So actually that part is also being automated to find these true or like proven facts or knowledge. So sorry, kind of like taking a long time to come up with the question, but I think that's one thing I had in mind, because now you cannot really say it's true, because maybe you live in that part of the world where people would say it's true, others would say not. But then you ask a tool like this, which is global, and it has this challenge to find a solution that could work for all the cultures.
Yeah, well, that's cool, because the context, let's say, could be research papers, and there are millions of research papers. And if you have a model like that, and hopefully Google has it for that particular tool, but doesn't use just an opinion of the people who publish stuff on the internet in general, then it will give you like more accurate answers, I believe, and will provide you with references to certain research papers and so forth. So yeah, the context I think is everything in that case. Even when I try to write a certain test, automation test at my work, to get a reasonable results back from the AI, I need to show how I did this before.
You have to train it like you do with Notion.
Yeah, like I did with Notion. So I feed into the context certain files from the coded in the past and show, okay, here is my style, here is how we do it at the team. So please produce the similar result, but for a new behavior. All right. And then it does pretty much good job from that perspective. Okay. Also, I use GitHub Copilot. That's some AI that helps you code faster. For my trainings projects at work, we don't have it enabled yet, but for trainings projects, I do. And whenever I code something, this Copilot immediately recognizes the patterns of my style of coding that I use. And next time I only try to do something similar, the Copilot gives me already a sample up front that is like I did, like I would do. So its accuracy to learn from you is very good, I think. Initial setup, it has some, let's say, internet knowledge, how people code it, different cultures, different companies, different setups, and so forth. But then it observes how you do it specifically, learns from that, and based on this knowledge gives you a way more quality answer. And this answer is also, look, this answer is also very, very subjective to you. It's quality output for me because I'm used to code like that. I trained my AI how I need the output and so, but it would be completely nonsense and doesn't working version for a style of another team, another developer, you know? Yeah. So it's also based on you as a user of these tools, what output you qualify good, what not. Just like you said, in one country, certain accessibility rule could be one, in another could be another one, because they have their environment, their culture, their decision. Until you feed the context, this LLM cannot give you like specific results that you will evaluate quality.
Very good aspects, because I think if you look what happened before, so if we looked for right answers or we looked for something to learn from, you look at universities, you look at institutions that have that knowledge. How do they gain that knowledge? They train something, they research, they publish. That's kind of what we look for. And I think now what you said is that, but also democratized, because now you don't have to go to university, or you don't need to be able to apply to the certain scholarship or whatever it is, education. So you can access that data. You can also build your own. And I think that part I'm very curious about, because like you said, it's kind of, on the one side, it's your perspective. You train it, so you think it's good. And then let's take Copilot. I'm curious about that one. It's also being trained in the way other tools are, right? Like it does do learning upgrades. So it has like 1.0, 2.0 new versions. And when it gets upgraded, like it gets a new version, does it learn that version contains the data from everything that it learns in that part, like everybody who's using it? Or how does it work?
Yes. Yeah. Well, they continuously feed more and more data and see how the patterns of coding are, especially in open source community where the code is available. And it learns from other people. Yeah. But of course, since it's the usage is based on you, on the consumer, it also keeps in mind the context about you, you know, and it continuously extends with you. So there is some part which is global, and that gets update and versions and so forth. And there is some internal part that it takes about you and knows about you. So yeah,
because that's something that's very important. I mean, also if you look at it from the design side, that contextual awareness is very important, right? Because if you could design an app, you can make it for virtual reality, you can make it as a more classic 2D interface on your Mac. There's many ways to approach a project like this.
Absolutely.
And I think, yeah, for that, you need to know whom you work for or why.
Yeah, what's interesting is I tried some prompts to create my virtual coach because I'm on this paid version of ChatGPT. It allows you to create some kind of scoped chats.
Okay, nice.
And I took and explained exactly who should be that coach. And I took certain people that are my heroes and explained that you should behave like Rafa Nadal in certain aspects, like Jason Fried in certain aspect, like
very interesting.
yeah, like the author of the Greed book in certain aspects, and support me like this, do like this, resist like this, and so forth. So I wrote a kind of a long text, let's say, a long prompt, who I want you to be. Okay.
Okay.
And feeded that into, and it behaves very differently than if you would start from scratch and in general just ask questions and do your job and so forth. It really keeps in context at who it should be, and it tries to, before giving you a response, it seems it's like trying to analyze, okay, what you asked, okay, how would Rafa answer that, in certain context based on the knowledge of this LLM, and then it mixes it and gives you some output which is interesting, and different from default setup when you don't give such a long prompt.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's really nice. You probably have some interesting conversations with. Yeah. I find that very cool. So when you use that coach, is it that do you have the prompt that you want to talk to the coach now?
I have a separate chat with this context in mind. On ChatGPT paid version, you could create such chats.
Like in the left side. So you then click one of those chats.
Yeah, well, yes. And yeah, exactly. And I continue with this chat always. And it keeps the context, it keeps everything in place. And yeah,
cool.
It's more like, for me, just somebody who helps go through daily tasks and so forth. It's not specific to programming, nothing like that. It's just specific to building a routine and reminding me to do stuff and supporting me and celebrating small wins together, and so forth. It feels weird from one perspective because it's not a human, but I'm asking from that computer being a human.
Yeah.
But that's fun. And sometimes when I do this, and another experiment, to employ the LLM for your benefit.
I think it's a really nice way to learn certain things, like I'm trying something similarly, not during my life, like regular tasks, but there are certain psychologists or certain people that I also think are very interesting. So I started having this conversation when I said, okay, let's look at this topic from this person's view.
Yeah.
And then how would the other person discuss it with that person? So kind of similar to what you've done. And I think it really helps to understand their theories. So you really it's reinforcement learning for yourself. So otherwise you would be saying like, okay, I want to change something in my life like this or like that. But you always have to remember yourself. And I think that's hard, right? Like you want to lose weight, you want to do more sports, all the things that are there. You always have to remind yourself. But I think if you're in the situation, I try at the moment, usually when I get pressured in timelines or things like this, I come to this chat and I'm like, okay, let's see how can we approach this in the time that we have. And only yesterday I was really laughing while thinking about it. Because right now we have like 2 deadlines. So on Monday we have to launch 2 projects. We also want to do our own website until next week, things like this, so we can launch in time. And usually I would really slip and just focus on work, do nothing else, the usual behavior. But now with this chat, it's really nice because it's very small, tiny conversations every day, but it helps me to stay sane. It's like, no, you can still stop at 6 or 5.
Yeah.
And maybe you deprioritize certain things. You don't have to finish everything on Monday. Like all these things that you usually would think about while you read the book or while you try to learn. But now you can do it in micro sessions throughout those situations.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a wonderful
Just thought
experience
about
you
it.
go through. I agree. All these, which we mentioned today, is just a part of discovery, because this employment of these AI tools is still in discovery phase.
Hmm.
And if we want to make our lives more effective, make us more effective, reduce costs maybe, then
Yeah.
we shall be these researchers who try to see how
Mm.
to apply that, because it's a huge tool. It's a very powerful tool, I believe. We just have to
Yes.
figure out how to fit it in our daily work so it really adds.
Yes. Yeah.
And
It's a very good point.
and this
Yeah.
and
You
this
go
and
on.
this takes time,
Mhm.
especially what I
Mhm.
recognize is that in general we people are quite weak in formulating our thoughts,
Yes. Yeah.
and
I
this
just
is
wanted to
very
mention that.
visible when these AI tools
Yes.
appeared,
Hmm.
because we also can take a lesson from that, but that actually when we talk to somebody believing that the other person will understand it like we want, that's not
Yes.
true. That's far
Hmm.
from true,
Totally.
because we cannot explain and formulate our thoughts to the computer, and the computer doesn't understand correctly. It understands after
Hmm.
multiple prompts, multiple approaches, how you try to explain and so. And this is a good
Yeah.
opportunity for us, by consuming these tools, by formulating our thoughts, to get
Mm.
better at that, better at communications,
Yes. Yeah.
more detailed, more specific, more providing more context. Don't use abbreviations, you know,
Mm.
because
Hmm.
people won't understand you, especially if they are
Yeah.
not in your context, in your company, in your setup, and you talk
Mm.
with certain abbreviations that they don't know about at all. And so
Mm.
you believe they
Yeah.
understood, but then recall that situations many times that people come to you afterwards and you see their output or their behavior, which you thought will be different because you believe that they understood you, but at the end it's not because they wanted to do differently like you thought, but just because they understood it like that, they did like that. In reality, you
Yeah.
formulated it wrong. You formulated it for yourself, but other people are not
Yes.
you. They don't know this.
Hmm.
And this symptom is very, very popular within creators, within people who create something.
Mm.
They very
Yeah.
fast evaluate what they create because they believe that it's nothing special. That's their part of their routine. They do this every day. They paint, they draw, they create, they design, they code, and this is nothing
Mm.
special. And this is misconception. But a lot of people out there, for them, it's just really some creative work, some fantastic work,
Yes.
So this is
That
the
they've never
same.
done.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is the same there. We believe that what we
Mhm.
communicate will be the same understood like we have it in mind, but that's
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this AI tool gives us the opportunity to become better communicators.
I think it's very exciting, really. Like in the beginning, I haven't really thought about it that way. But then I watched some of those conversations where people did this. They wanted to talk to some old writer that doesn't live anymore.
Mhm.
So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. I started to practice. And I think those experiences you just mentioned or those learnings, it's so cool because in your life, like especially the last few months, before I've always been on the side of the service provider, like I've been the one doing something for the client.
Mhm.
And so far, I've never really purchased anything that has been so personal that I would have to ask somebody to make it. And I think this year has been really the first time with this architect that I had to change the perspective to look at it from the other side.
Mhm.
And then you experience this moment where, like, okay, you get an offer from another person. Usually you go to the shop or you buy something online and shows the
Yeah.
price. It's one thing you buy or multiple. But now you look into the service. So you have these conversations. And there were moments like you mentioned, I'm like, okay, I understand this very similar to my work. We do this concept phase and then we do some testing and all the requirements. But that's just my model, my mental model of how I understand, right? So then we have this conversation. I'm like, okay, this is how it works. Next day she comes back and then she tells me, okay, this is what you do now. This is what I do now. I'm like, oh, Okay. Interesting. I understand very different things. So, and really making this, like having this experience is making this learning, I think is so cool, for everybody, everyday talking, like you talk to your friends,
Yeah,
you externalize and you say, you got this wrong, I said it this way, let's do it this way. So I think it's funny because then in this conversation, there is no other person. And then you're like, why do you not understand this the right way? I check my prompt, I'm like, okay, yeah. Well, how can you? No?
I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Yeah, we need like more people like you who are discovering, who are seeing the opportunity with these tools, and I believe that this will just polish the tools in general. That people
Yeah.
really at some point could not put so much effort into explaining stuff, but rather, I don't know, feed something to that, maybe give access to something they have, like in my Notion, the AI has access
Yes.
to everything that I write,
Mm-hmm.
or in some other certain way that could help us to reduce this time until the output is really good for you to use.
It helps both sides, right? When you start looking at your business proposal or what's your service offering, all these things, you talk about through them for yourself. You do some first workshops, like it's a process working on this, but it's not being documented. So I think what you do is really cool to have it all in your Notion.
Yeah.
Because from what I understand, when you train the AI, that stays your knowledge, right? Or, you don't have to give that knowledge to the outside.
No, I think they don't.
Yeah.
They don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
we all experience this setup that you had some documents in Google Drive, Dropbox, wherever we store certain things, contracts, I
Yeah.
don't know, many documents actually, even pictures and media, people store somewhere. And we experience maximum that that we could search through that by certain keywords, titles, maybe some filtering by media types, whatever. This is a normal experience, how we try to recall and find something that we need. But now with this Notion, it's very different, but it's similar to what ChatGPT can do with PDFs now. But this knowledge that I was putting in many years, they now can answer questions about that, not just find something that mentions the keywords or mentions some text from your question, but really formulate the answer based on your material.
Yeah.
This is
very
yeah,
semantic,
this is
right?
yeah. This is similar what if you feed a PDF into ChatGPT or drop a link in Google Gemini to YouTube and tell, okay, can you summarize this? Can you answer the question about this document or this YouTube video? And then the AI gives you these specific answers to that context that you feed it, and Notion does it on a whole like database that you created within the years.
Nice.
And that could be also like in many businesses, I think could benefit from that, because you store somewhere your proposals to the customers where you formulate what would be done. Your outcome reports probably you store somewhere, which you send the customer that we did this, and this, and so forth. You probably store your designs in some format somewhere, maybe in apps or maybe outside the apps, or just screenshots. And theoretically, this all could be very beneficial for the company to be a context for your QA session with the AI. So imagine some interface where just a chat interface, conversational interface, where any person from your company, from your team can enter and ask question. And this will give you answer based on the knowledge about this particular company, not just general one online, but this particular company, how we took decision, with whom we were cooperating back then, and so why we did this and what we exactly implemented, where are the data stored, how this is done. All these could be like answered and provided with some reference documents that you could in details review or ask questions specifically about that document, what is the
I think it's
conditions
so
of the
cool.
contract, that we signed back then,
Mhm.
why we are now sued or so, and all these like could be figured out. That would be very powerful. I believe this will be done, if not yet done, for companies too. There will be some offer that Notion is doing already for their private customers, but also
Makes total
for
sense.
companies. I
Yeah.
think Google will do that, or whoever storage system has, like Dropbox, probably will do this at some
It's
point.
kind of like what Apple announced with Siri. So you can ask it now, how does this work?
Yeah.
How can I do this on my phone?
In Apple, that probably whole your computer being indexed and taken as a context,
Yeah. So I think there is a lot of potential. It's just a very different way of looking at the work that we do. I think on the one side, I find very liberating because you don't have to do those repetitive tasks all the time. First, I was like, okay, it's going to take away the work that we do on the concept and the wireframes. But then I was like, no. Last time we had the sitemap generated from the current product that the client has online. So we use this plugin from Figma. It generates pretty good sitemap of the current website. You have to do some refinements and change some things, but basically it's good. And that saves, like 2, 3, 4 days of work. Yeah. So that's very helpful. There's one project we have right now. There is also customer service in the app, but right now you have to go to another Q&A website or FAQ site. Outside the app, you have to search, you have to find the right keyword, read the whole article. And then we propose this idea that in the search box, you can just type the keyword, how do I do XYZ? And then it explains to you in the result how you can do it, or even sets up the thing for you.
Imagine also onboarding process when your people enters your team and they want to figure out the systems that you have, how you do this and that. And that would be cool that you have answers to this.
I totally agree. And I think also while you talked about it, explain things, you sign up to something, there's terms and conditions. And right now they're very long and very legal focused, and then you can ask the tool, can you explain this to me in a way that I can also understand what's important to understand? It's very cool. Yeah.
Well, I think this evolution will continue and will benefit at least us who are actively using it, but not only observing. Many things will come, and many things will be automated or semi-automated, accelerated, simplified, and so forth. We just have to continuously see where they fit, where they add value, how to adjust or configure them with the proper prompts and so forth. And this, AI, and not only AI, but other tools too, will help out. So part of life, the digital now became so strong part of life that the distance now between the previous generation, our parents and we and us, is like crazy growing,
Yes. Yeah. It's crazy. On the one side, you have people who don't use email, who really genuinely don't know what email is. They still have a regular life. They just go about things their day. And then you have conversations like we are having.
And next Gen Z and so forth, they also are advanced in certain ways, and I'm trying to keep up. I'm trying to also, I want actually such a prompt chat that will help me to be up to date with this, because even emojis, we use emojis which are already like old school, for that.
Old school. So funny, last time I was using the regular thumbs up.
No, don't use it anymore.
The person is like, this is very aggressive using this emoji. Sorry.
Yeah. That's just funny thing, but in general, we have to keep up too, because they are developing very fast, and the technology is part of their lives. In our lives, we are in this again privileged situation when we used to live without technology, without the phone, and we transitioned in the age where we were like understanding what happens. We transitioned and became these major customers, major users of the digital technology tools. And so we are in this transitional, we lived in this transitional period. This is beautiful, because you could compare your IQ is, I think, higher because of this. And now Gen Z is just living directly in this era where technology is part of life, and they don't know that it that there were times that it never existed, you know.
Yes.
Historically, they know, of course, but like practically, they don't know what it is exists without the digital tools and so forth.
Yeah.
So
it's very important thing, I think, to consider, because if you work with teams now, it's very likely that there will be somebody who's maybe 20 or even in their 20s. That's something they have maybe not experienced so much. And I think people who are now like in their teens, they don't. And I think being able to work with them, have conversations, and see their perspective, it's very different. Yeah.
I agree.
Because I think, like you said, having the knowledge how this came along, or like how this evolved, is a given. You know, like this is there. You have internet access. You can ask ChatGPT all these questions, but that's not a given. You know, like 20, 30 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, Marius. Yeah, it was nice to talk to you. Great conversation today. Great topic, I think.
Yes, likewise. Thank you. Yeah.
My name is Nick, and I'm hosting this podcast. I'm a software developer, but I like to talk about philosophy, psychology, digital tools, and how progress further with our life.
Nice. My name is Marius. I'm a designer. I discuss these topics with Nick from the creative side as a designer.